My name is Rachel Bennett. I'm 39 years old. 12 years ago, I walked into a rundown diner with a leaking roof and a broken sign, and I saw something nobody else did. I saw what it could become. I took out a loan I could barely afford, worked 18-hour days for the first 3 years, and slowly built the Copper Spoon into one of the most loved restaurants in town. I didn't inherit it. I didn't marry into it. I built it, brick by brick, plate by plate, with my own 2 hands. Every table, every recipe, every regular customer who knew my name, that was mine. I skipped weddings. I missed my own birthday 3 years in a row because Friday nights were too busy to leave the kitchen. I dated the restaurant more than I ever dated a person. My parents were proud of me. At least, I thought they were. Whenever they visited, my mother would walk through the dining room, touching the tablecloths, smiling at the framed photos on the wall. "You've built something beautiful, Rachel." My father would nod along. "Your grandfather would be proud." Hearing that meant everything to me. My younger brother, Tyler, was 34. Charismatic, likable, and completely unreliable when it came to anything requiring consistency. He'd started 2 restaurants of his own over the years, both funded partly by our parents, both closed within 18 months. Every time something fell apart, my parents were there with a check and a story about how it wasn't really his fault. I never said anything. I told myself every family has someone who struggles more. I didn't need anyone to hand me anything. I had built my own success, and that was enough for me. Then, 6 months ago, everything changed. My father called me on a Tuesday evening. "Rachel, we need to have a family meeting. It's important." I drove to my parents' house that night straight from a double shift, still smelling like the kitchen. Tyler was already sitting at the table. So was my mother. The room felt different the moment I walked in. Nobody smiled. My father cleared his throat. Tyler's 3rd restaurant fell through. The investors pulled out. He needs a fresh start. I looked at my brother. He shrugged, like this was just another minor inconvenience in a long list of them. Then my mother reached across the table and took my hand, the exact same way she used to when I was a little girl who'd scraped her knee. "Honey, we've been talking. You've built such a strong business. Maybe it's time to let Tyler take over the Copper Spoon. You could always open something new." I sat there for a moment, certain I had misunderstood her. "You want me to give Tyler my restaurant?" "Not give," my father said quickly. "Just let him run it. Keep it in the family name." "It already has a family name," I said. "Mine." Tyler finally spoke, his voice flat and dismissive. "Come on, Rachel. It's just a restaurant. You could build another one in your sleep. Just a restaurant." To him, maybe. To me, it was 12 years of 18-hour days, every holiday spent behind a stove, every ounce of my 20s and half my 30s. I stood up. "I'm not signing anything over to anyone." My father's expression hardened. "So you'd rather see your own brother fail again?" I answered calmly, though my hands were shaking. "I'd rather he learn to succeed on his own, the way I had to." Tyler slammed his hand on the table. "So now you think you're better than me?" "No," I said. "I just made different choices." The argument lasted almost an hour. Eventually, I walked out, heartbroken and furious in equal measure. As I drove home, I kept asking myself how the people who raised me to work hard could suddenly expect me to hand away everything I had built. I had no idea they had already set something in motion behind my back, and that within days, I would walk into my own restaurant and barely recognize it. I barely slept that night. My mother's words kept looping in my head. "You could always open something new." As if 12 years could simply be rebuilt overnight, like moving furniture. The next morning, I went into the restaurant like always, running inventory, checking the morning delivery, greeting the regulars who came in for their usual coffee and eggs. Work had always been my refuge. That day, it didn't feel the same. 3 days later, my mother called. "Rachel, can you stop by the restaurant this afternoon? We'd like to finish the conversation properly." Her voice was unusually cheerful, and something about that cheerfulness made my stomach tighten. Still, I agreed, telling myself this could still be resolved like reasonable adults. When I walked in that afternoon, Tyler's car was already parked outside, next to a car I didn't recognize. Inside, a man in a grey suit sat at one of my tables, a leather folder open in front of him. My father stood as I entered, smiling like everything was already decided. "Rachel, this is Mr. Doyle. He's a business attorney. We thought it would help to have things explained properly." My stomach dropped. This wasn't a conversation. This was an ambush with paperwork already printed. Mr. Doyle shook my hand politely and gestured toward the table. "Ms. Bennett, I understand the family would like to formalize a change in ownership. Given Tyler's operational experience and your parents' wishes, we've prepared a straightforward transfer agreement." I stared at the documents. Ownership transfer forms. Operating agreements. My restaurant's name typed neatly at the top, waiting for my signature to sign it all away. Tyler leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, watching me the way someone watches a foregone conclusion. "It's not permanent, Rachel. Just until things settle." I looked at him steadily. The last 2 restaurants were also just until things settled. His jaw tightened, but he had nothing to say to that. My mother's voice softened, the way it always did right before she asked for something. "Honey, this is what family does. We help each other." I took a slow breath. "No. My answer hasn't changed." My father's face darkened. "Think carefully, Rachel. If you turn your back on your brother now, don't expect this family to be there for you later." I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. I've never once asked this family for help. Not before I built this place, and not after. I stood, pushed the papers back across the table, and walked toward the door. Before I left, I turned around one last time. I love this family, but I will not apologize for protecting what I built with my own hands. Then I walked out, got in my car, and drove home with my hands trembling on the wheel. The next morning, I arrived at the restaurant before sunrise, the way I did every single day. But something felt wrong the moment I turned the corner. The lights were already on. The sign out front had been changed overnight, a new banner reading under new management hung above the entrance. My heart began pounding as I hurried through the door. Tyler stood behind my counter, rearranging the register, completely at ease, like he belonged there. He looked up and smiled. "Oh, hey. Perfect timing." I stood frozen just inside the doorway. "What is this?" He shrugged, gesturing around the dining room. "Taking over." Figured it was easier to just start than wait around for everyone to agree. My parents appeared from the back office, stepping out as if this were the most natural thing in the world. "We assumed you'd come around eventually," my father said, and my mother added gently, "Family shouldn't fight over a business, Rachel." I looked between the 3 of them. My own family, standing inside the restaurant I had built from nothing, a new sign already hanging outside, as though 12 years of my life could be rebranded overnight. This wasn't disrespect anymore. This was theft wearing a family name. I reached into my apron pocket, pulled out my phone, and dialed a number I hadn't needed in years, my business attorney, the one who had helped me structure the restaurant's ownership from the very beginning. "Mr. Reyes, it's Rachel Bennett. I think it's time we talked." His voice was calm and immediate. "I was wondering when you'd call. Come by first thing tomorrow." I hung up and slid the phone back into my pocket. Tyler laughed, shaking his head. "Calling lawyers now? A little dramatic, don't you think?" I met his eyes without flinching. "You forgot something very important, Tyler." For the first time that morning, his confidence flickered. "What's that supposed to mean?" I didn't answer. I simply turned, walked back out to my car, and drove to my attorney's office, unwilling to spend another minute inside a building that had suddenly become a stranger's stage set. The next morning, I sat across from Mr. Reyes in his office, the same office where I had signed the restaurant's founding paperwork 12 years earlier, full of hope and terrified excitement. "Tell me honestly," I said. "Can they actually take this from me?" Mr. Reyes smiled gently and opened a thick folder. "No, Rachel. They can't. And I think they've forgotten something rather important." He slid a single document across the desk, the original operating agreement, along with the LLC formation papers filed the year I opened the restaurant. "When you founded the Copper Spoon," he explained, "you structured it as a single-member LLC. You are the sole legal owner. Any transfer of ownership requires your notarized signature. Without that signature, no transfer is legally valid, regardless of what anyone printed or signed among themselves. I stared at the paper, my eyes filling with tears I hadn't expected. They never had me sign anything. Exactly, Mr. Reyes said. Which means legally, nothing has changed. Tyler has no ownership stake. He has no legal right to operate the business, change signage, or access accounts. Everything he's done in the last 24 hours has been unauthorized. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe again. Meanwhile, back at the restaurant, Tyler had already begun rearranging things to suit himself. He'd changed the specials board, rewritten the menu prices, even started interviewing a new head chef to replace the one I had trained for years. This place is going to do even better under new management, he told a friend who'd stopped by to see the changes. Rachel just needed someone to finally take the reins. His friend looked around, impressed. So she just handed it over. Tyler smirked. She didn't have much of a choice, honestly. They both laughed, completely unaware that legal reality was already on its way to interrupt the celebration. Around noon the next day, a car pulled up outside the restaurant, followed by Mr. Reyes and a process server. Tyler stepped outside, still confident. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" The process server handed him an envelope. "You've been served." Tyler frowned, tearing it open. "Served? With what?" "A cease and desist order," Mr. Reyes said calmly, "along with formal notice that you have no legal authority to operate this business. Ms. Bennett is the sole owner of the Copper Spoon LLC. Any transfer of ownership was never executed." My parents rushed out from inside, panic written across their faces. "There has to be some mistake," my father said. "We signed papers. We had an agreement." "With respect," Mr. Reyes replied, "an agreement between family members isn't a legal transfer. Ownership of an LLC can only be transferred by the sole member, Rachel, with a notarized signature. That signature was never given." My mother's face went pale. "But she's our daughter. This is a family business." "She's also," Mr. Reyes said, "the only legal owner." At that exact moment, I pulled into the parking lot and stepped out of my car. The entire family turned toward me. Tyler crossed the lot to meet me, his voice sharp. "You brought lawyers into this? Against your own family?" I looked at him steadily. "No, Tyler. You brought this on yourself the moment you hung a new sign over a business that was never yours to take." My father lowered his eyes, unable to meet mine. "We thought you'd eventually agree, for the family's sake." "You never asked me," I said quietly. "You decided for me, and then you tried to force it while I wasn't even in the room." My mother began to cry. "We only wanted to help your brother. And in doing that," I said, "you tried to take away everything I built to give him something he never earned." No one had an answer for that. Tyler stood there holding the legal notice, his hands trembling, his confidence completely gone. "So what am I supposed to do now?" I looked at him, my voice steady. "The same thing I've done every single day for 12 years. Start from nothing, and build it yourself." For the first time in his life, no one rushed to rescue him. Not our parents. Not me. Not anyone. The new sign came down that same afternoon. The chef Tyler had tried to hire quietly walked away once he learned the ownership was still in dispute. By evening, the restaurant was exactly as I had left it 3 days earlier, except now it felt different, like something precious had been tested and had survived. My father approached me slowly as the crew took down the last of Tyler's changes. "I never imagined it would come to this." "It didn't have to," I said. "You could have simply asked me for help, instead of deciding I owed you my life's work." He had no response. A week later, my mother called and asked if we could talk, just the two of us. We met at a small cafe near the restaurant. She looked smaller than I remembered, tired in a way that had nothing to do with age. "I'm sorry, Rachel," she said, her voice breaking. "We spent so many years softening every failure for Tyler that we forgot what it did to the people around him. To you." I nodded slowly. "I never wanted to compete with my brother. I only wanted to be treated fairly." "You deserved that," she whispered. We just didn't give it to you. 6 months later, Tyler took a job as a line cook at a restaurant across town, starting from the bottom the way I once had. He called me one evening, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. I got promoted to sous chef, he said. First promotion I've ever actually earned instead of been handed. There was something different in his voice. Not entitlement. Pride. That's a good place to start, I told him. That Christmas, for the first time in years, our family gathered without an agenda hidden beneath the surface. No arguments about the restaurant. No quiet manipulation disguised as concern. Just an honest dinner, full of the kind of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. My father raised his glass before we ate. I used to think helping Tyler meant protecting him from every hard consequence. I understand now that all it did was stop him from becoming who he was capable of being. Later that night, I stood alone in the dining room of the Copper Spoon after closing, the chairs stacked, the lights dimmed low. 12 years of my life were built into every wall, every worn tabletop, every recipe card in the kitchen drawer. The restaurant was never just a business. It was proof of every sacrifice I had made and refused to let anyone erase. Sometimes the people who love us make painful mistakes, mistaking convenience for care. Forgiveness matters. But so do boundaries. Because protecting what you've built with your own hands is never selfish. And that is the one tiny signature my family almost forgot to get.